So what kind of services do we offer at the Willow then for survivors of human trafficking? Both services that are similar to and done with survivors of domestic violence, and also services that we may offer that may be exclusive to survivors of human trafficking.
Yeah, so shelter is an option for both, right? Human trafficking and domestic violence survivors, and in shelter we have an advocate that is directly trained in human trafficking, and so all of our advocates are trained in both, but we have one that is primarily human trafficking. And so when we are serving people in our shelter, we have a case management model. So the human trafficking advocate would directly work with that survivor and provide other support systems, other more further education on human trafficking if that's what they would like. We're empowerment based, so whatever the survivor wants is and how they want to work through their goals and their trauma is what we're going to do to support them. But we do have a direct advocate that is just human trafficking, and then I'm also part-time in shelter, so we have that where we make that connection where I would also work with that survivor, because then transitioning out of shelter, we've built that trust, we've built that rapport. They know who I am. And so then when they leave shelter, when we can get them to a safe place, and then I can continue to work with them in the community. I meet with survivors on a regular basis. I check in with them for, we still work on goals and still accomplishing goals, and just as a support. So they're having a rough day, or if we need to look into addiction services or anything, I'm there as their backbone, as somebody that they know, that they can trust, that they know that they have to offer. There's nothing that they need to worry about. There's no other reason why I'm doing it other than to help them. And so we just try to make the connections. We make the connection. And then there's survivors who don't necessarily need shelter, but they still need human trafficking advocacy. And so I work with them to again build that rapport with them, to get them their goals, to meet those needs, and be a stable person in their life. And when I'm not there, we work on different grounding techniques, different things that they can use to cope through what they've been through. But knowing that they still have a support system with the Willow, and knowing that we do offer support groups. We do offer these things for coming through trauma and getting on the other side of that as best they can. And so we're that support system. So what we do for domestic violence and human trafficking is very, very similar. But we do have this specific program that really focuses on the education behind it and being that stable system behind them that is just there to see them succeed, and no other reason than to see them succeed.
One interesting thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier that I just kind of wanted to touch back on again, because I think it is such a kind of vital point, is that education aspect of things. Because oftentimes when you're building those relationships and building with the trust with survivors, one thing I've spoken with other advocates about is human trafficking. We have questions about it as part of our intake and part of our questionnaire, but for some survivors, they won't even realize they're being trafficked until later in the process, until actually talking a little bit about what trafficking entails.
Right.
So I think that's really kind of an interesting phenomenon, and something that I think when people think about this, that they may not necessarily think about, is that the situation when it comes to something like survival sex, it can be in this kind of gray area where they don't think it's human trafficking, but again, once that coercion and that power and control is in there, then it does in fact become that, and that can be a very, very blurred line.
Right. And, so we really, part of our case management model is to provide this education, and we really focus on, red flags of an abusive personality and the power and control wheel. But we just have a whole page on how to break down what human trafficking is without getting too wordy. It can get confusing. It can go into things that don't make sense to people, because human trafficking, it's so dynamic, right? There's so many different ways people can be trafficked, and it is such a hidden crime, and it's such an underreported crime. And so we really focus on that. And even if the survivor isn't ready to talk about it, that's okay. We're still going to give them that education and let them know that when you are ready, we're here. If you're never ready, that's okay too, right? But providing that education to know what it is, to know this is something that I maybe need to process, or this is something I need to look out for in the future, or for my friends or for my family. And the more we can spread that education, the better. It can save someone's life. And so we really, really try to focus on it and make it as simple and most understandable as possible, because it does get really murky. The understanding of human trafficking gets confusing.
Absolutely.